Good evening, friends. We welcome you to this virtual Holy Mass. This Mass was celebrated in the Archdiocese of Toronto by Father Robert Muska. Before we begin, it's a kind request to everyone participating to put your phones in silent mode. Thank you. Let us make sign of the cross.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son,
and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. Let us rise for the entrance hymn.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Holy Spirit. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with your spirit.
Brothers and sisters, let us now acknowledge our sins and so prepare ourselves to celebrate these sacred mysteries. You were sent to heal the contrite of heart. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
You came to call sinners. Christ, have mercy.
Christ, have mercy.
You are seated at the right hand of the Father to intercede for us. Lord, have mercy.
Lord, have mercy.
May Almighty God have mercy on us, forgive us our sins, and bring us to everlasting life.
Amen.
To
us pray. O God, who have bestowed on us paschal remedies, endow your people with heavenly gifts, so that possessed of perfect freedom, they may rejoice in heaven over what gladdens them now on earth. Through our Lord Jesus Christ, your Son, who lives and reigns with you in the unity of the Holy Spirit, one God forever and ever.
Amen. In today's first reading, Peter asks the Jews to repent and be baptized in the name of Jesus Christ.
First reading. Reading from Acts of the Apostles, chapter 2, verses 36 to 41. Therefore let all Israel be assured of this. God has made this Jesus, whom you crucified, both Lord and Messiah. When the people heard this, they were cut to the heart and said to Peter and the other apostles, Brothers, what shall we do? Peter replied, Repent and be baptized, every one of you, in the name of Jesus Christ, for the forgiveness of your sins, and you will receive the gift of the Holy Spirit. The promise is for you and your children, and for all who are far off, for all whom the Lord our God will call. With many other words he warned them, and he pleaded with them, Save yourselves from this corrupt generation. Those who accepted his message were baptized, and about 3,000 were added to their number that day. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. The word of the Lord is upright, and all his work is done in faithfulness. He loves righteousness and justice. The earth is full of the steadfast love of the Lord. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Truly, the eye of the Lord is on those who fear him, on those who hope in his steadfast love, to deliver their souls from death, and to keep them alive in famine. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord. Our soul waits for the Lord. He is our help and shield. Let your steadfast love, O Lord, be upon us, even as we hope in you. The earth is full of the goodness of the Lord.
Let's rise for the acclamation.
Alleluia, 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 alleluia. This is the day the Lord has made. Let us rejoice and be glad. Alleluia, alleluia,
Gospel reading, Mary of Magdalene meets risen Jesus outside the tomb, who asks her to share this news with the disciples.
The Lord be with you.
And with your
A
spirit.
reading from the Holy Gospel according to John.
Glory to you, O Lord.
Mary Magdalene stood weeping outside the tomb. As she wept, she bent over to look into the tomb, and she saw two angels in white sitting where the body of Jesus had been lying, one at the head and the other at the feet. They said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping?" She said to them, "They have taken away my Lord, and I do not know where they have laid him." When she had said this, she turned around and saw Jesus standing there, but she did not know that it was Jesus. Jesus said to her, "Woman, why are you weeping? Whom are you looking for?" Supposing him to be the gardener, she said to him, "Sir, if you have carried him away, tell me where you have laid him, and I will take him away." Jesus said to her, "Mary." She turned and said to him in Hebrew, "Rabboni," which means teacher. Jesus said to her, "Do not hold on to me, because I have not yet ascended to the Father. But go to my brothers and say to them, I am ascending to my Father and your Father, to my God and your God." Mary Magdalene went and announced to the disciples, "I have seen the Lord." And she told them that he had said these things to her. The Gospel of the Lord.
Praise
Praise
to you, Lord Jesus Christ.
Today's Gospel, St. John describes for us the risen Lord's appearance to Mary Magdalene, who holds a very privileged place as she encounters the risen Jesus, also for having been a witness to the earthly life and ministry of our Lord. And I think a number of points emerge for our reflection. First of all, we see that the resurrection appearances are restricted to those closest to our Lord. That is to say, he doesn't appear to the whole world. He doesn't appear to those who have mocked him, rejected, crucified him. He doesn't appear to Judas, to Herod, to Pontius Pilate. Rather, our Lord appears to those who love him, appears to those to whom he had been closest during his earthly ministry, those who were doing their best to try to continue to follow. And so whatever failures, misunderstandings, whatever imperfections, we see that Mary Magdalene and the other disciples are still doing their best to follow our Lord on the way of the gospel. Mary Magdalene had seen him die on the cross. She's the first here, as we hear, to arrive at the tomb, discovering it empty. And she sees angels. And as we see in today's gospel, even stands face to face with the risen Lord himself. But as John describes for us, she still doesn't quite understand what she's seeing. Like with the disciples on the road to Emmaus, encountering our Lord but not quite recognizing him at first. At first, in fact, Mary thinks that he's the gardener. Her very privileged place then, as an earthly follower of Jesus during his earthly ministry, as an eyewitness to key events, it doesn't in and of itself give her a kind of automatic enlightenment concerning now this transformation that has taken place in our Lord in the resurrection. So it is, Jesus invites her, take the next step. Do not hold on to me. Don't cling to what is now, on your part, an outworn understanding of me. And Jesus emerges from the tomb then. His appearance is transformed. And so indeed, he will transform the eyes of all to whom he appears, giving them spiritual vision, spiritual perception. So as we strive to appropriate this story for ourselves, to see ourselves, can we say, mirrored in the story of the fourth gospel, we can take great consolation in the fact that Jesus doesn't demand of us perfect understanding. In the words of one commentator, so long as the disciple is following the revealer, revelation is still in progress. So long as we're doing our best to follow our Lord, to walk in the way of the gospel, in the way of the cross, God's grace will continue to be at work within us to clarify, to deepen, to transform, to enlighten, to strengthen, to draw us ever closer to the heart of Jesus. And so to make of us, the mystics, the beloved disciples that we're being called to be in our life of faith. So it was in the time of St. John, and so it is for us so many, many centuries later. So the Gospels during this time of Easter then serve to remind us that the eyes of faith open gradually to this enormous transformation signaled in the resurrection of Jesus from the dead. Just as the heart of the believer tends to arrive slowly, gradually, at the joy and the interior peace that Jesus has come to bring us. For our Lord says in the Gospel of John, I have spoken these things to you so that my joy may be in you and your joy may be complete. The road then to mature faith is a gradual process. For us, most of us indeed, is a lifelong journey of faith and a struggle in our trying to understand more deeply, more fully, the mysteries of our faith. So it's very important for us to be attentive to where Jesus continues to appear to us today, to speak to us. All we need to do is to study the lives of the saints, the writings of the saints, who remind us of the importance of being attentive to the presence of the risen Christ in our midst every day. St. John Vianney, the Curé of Ars, St. Peter Julian Aymard, and St. Thomas Aquinas experienced the joy of the risen Christ through their encounters with him in the Eucharist, the source, the summit of Christian experience, Christian existence. St. Paul, Ignatius of Loyola, St. Alphonsus Liguori teach us how to choose Christ in every circumstance. They teach us about the moral life, the ethics of being Christian. And so to experience the joy of hearing his voice as the voice of conscience in our interior processes of decision making. For where the Spirit of the Lord is, there is freedom. St. Benedict, the monastic orders through the centuries, experienced the joy of Jesus in meditating on the scriptures in Lectio Divina, and the voice of the Word of God as it calls out to us from the pages of sacred scripture. So as we meditate on the example of Mary Magdalene, the earliest followers of our Lord, where do we encounter him in our daily life? Where is the Lord now standing in our midst, calling out to us in the life of the Easter faith, here and now? Let us remember that the risen Jesus is always with us on our journey, calling us to move from fear, from perplexity, from confusion, from the sufferings of the crisis of the present time, to the joy of transformation, the joy of faith for us personally and for all humanity. As we gather around the empty tomb then, this great mystery of our faith, let us heed the words of the risen Jesus and the angel. Do not be afraid. Don't be afraid. Rather, we pray for the grace to be transformed by Christ, to leave behind the empty tombs of sin, of fear, the empty tombs of confusion, of selfishness, of being attached too much to the things of this world. Just as the people journeyed from Egypt to the Promised Land, let us always remember that we are on a journey between two worlds, between this passing world and the life of the world to come. We think of St. John in the book of Revelation. Here we are struggling in this desert of this human existence as we journey toward the New Jerusalem and the new creation. And so we're called to journey then from sin to grace, from a broken humanity to the glory of which St. Paul writes in his letters. So as we continue to celebrate this Mass, we pray for the grace to always have our eyes open to the mystery of the radiant Jesus who stands in our midst. We pray for the grace and to help one another to acquire an ever-growing, ever-deepening sense of spiritual vision in this life. Finally, let us pray for the grace to know him, to make him known through our life of faith, through the sacramental life of the Church, especially through the Eucharist, the Word, the sacrament of reconciliation. And we pray for the grace to see him and serve him in the poor, the sick, the suffering, the outcast, for whom Jesus always had a very special love. Let us now make our prayers and petitions to God in heaven, ask him to hear and to answer our prayers. Loving God, we ask you to be with your church, with the Holy Father, with our bishops, priests, deacons, and with all your people, especially in places where the gift of the Mass may not be currently available. Today, as we gather as a community from many different countries around the world, we ask for your guidance during these difficult times. We pray to the Lord. Lord, hear us. For all who have died from, those suffering from, those involved in the medical care and treatment of those who are suffering from the coronavirus, and for all their families, we pray to the Lord. Lord, for the intentions of today's Mass, we pray to the Lord. Heavenly Father, we ask you to hear these prayers that we've made and those that remain deep within our hearts, for we make them all through Christ our Lord. Amen. brothers and sisters, that my sacrifice and yours may be acceptable to God, the Almighty Father.
May the Lord accept the sacrifice at your hands for the praise and glory of his name.
For our good and for the good of all. Accept in compassion, O Lord, we pray, these offerings of your family, that under your protective care they may never lose what they have received, but attain the gifts that are eternal. We ask this through Christ our Lord. Amen. The Lord be with you.
And with yours.
Lift up your hearts.
We lift them up to the
Let
Lord.
us give thanks to the Lord our God.
It is right and
It is
just.
truly right and just, our duty and our salvation, at all times to acclaim you, O Lord, but especially during this time to laud you yet more gloriously when Christ our Passover has been sacrificed. For he is the true Lamb who has taken away the sins of the world. By dying he has destroyed our death. By rising restored our life. Therefore, overcome with paschal joy, every land, every people exults in your praise. Even the heavenly powers and the angelic hosts sing together the unending hymn of your glory as they acclaim.
Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts. Holy, 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 Lord God of hosts. Heaven and earth are full of your glory. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Blessed, blessed, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Blessed, blessed, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord. Hosanna, Hosanna, Hosanna in the highest. Hosanna, Hosanna,
You are indeed holy, O Lord, the fount of all holiness. Make holy, therefore, these gifts, we pray, by sending down your Spirit upon them like the dewfall, so that they may become for us the body and blood of our Lord Jesus Christ. At the time he was betrayed and entered willingly into his passion, he took bread and giving thanks, broke it, and gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and eat of it, for this is my body, which will be given up for you."
My Lord, my God.
In a similar way, when supper was ended, he took the chalice, and once more giving thanks, he gave it to his disciples, saying, "Take this, all of you, and drink from it, for this is the chalice of my blood, the blood of the new and eternal covenant, which will be poured out for you and for many for the forgiveness of sins. Do this in memory of me."
My Lord, my God.
The mystery of faith.
We proclaim your death, O Lord, and profess your resurrection until you come again.
Therefore, Therefore, as we celebrate the memorial of his death and resurrection, we offer you, Lord, the bread of life and the chalice of salvation, giving thanks that you have held us worthy to be in your presence and minister to you. Humbly we pray that partaking of the body and blood of Christ, we may be gathered into one by the Holy Spirit. Remember, Lord, your church spread throughout the world, and bring her to the fullness of charity, together with Francis our Pope, Thomas our Bishop, and all the clergy. Remember also our brothers and sisters who have fallen asleep in the hope of the resurrection, and all who have died in your mercy. Welcome them into the light of your face. Have mercy on us all, we pray, that with the Blessed Virgin Mary, Mother of God, with Blessed Joseph, her spouse, with the blessed apostles and all the saints who have pleased you throughout the ages, we may merit to be co-heirs to eternal life, and may praise and glorify you through your Son, Jesus Christ. Through him, and with him, and in him, O God, Almighty Father, in the unity of the Holy Spirit, all glory and honor is yours forever and ever.
Amen.
At the Savior's command, informed by divine teaching, we dare to say,
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
deliver us, Lord, we pray, from every evil. Graciously grant peace in our days, that by the help of your mercy, we may be always free from sin and safe from all distress, as we await the blessed hope and the coming of our Savior, Jesus Christ.
For the kingdom, the power, and the glory are yours, now and forever.
Lord Jesus Christ, who said to your apostles, "Peace I leave you, my peace I give you," look not on our sins, but on the faith of your church, and graciously grant her peace and unity in accordance with your will, who live and reign forever and ever.
Amen.
The peace of the Lord be with you always.
And with your spirit.
Lamb of God,
You take away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, have mercy on us. Lamb of God, you take away the sin of the world, grant us peace.
Behold the Lamb of God, behold him who takes away the sins of the world. Blessed are those called to the supper of the Lamb.
Lord, I am not worthy that you should enter my life, but when you say a word, and my soul shall be healed.
since we cannot receive the Holy Communion, let us remember our best day and moment when we receive the body and blood of Christ. Remembering that, let us partake in the spiritual communion by saying this prayer. O Immaculate Queen
Of heaven and earth, Mother of God and mediator of every grace, I believe that your dearly beloved Son, our Lord Jesus Christ, is truly, really, and substantially contained in the most holy sacrament. I love him above all things and long to receive him in my heart. Since now I cannot receive him sacramentally, be so good to place him spiritually in my soul and never permit me to be separated from him. Amen.
We'll say the prayer after communion of St. Thomas Aquinas together. I
Thank you, Lord, Almighty Father, everlasting God, for having been pleased, through no merit of mine, but of your great mercy alone, to feed me, a sinner, and your unworthy servant, with the precious body and blood of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. I pray that this Holy Communion may not be for my judgment and condemnation, but for my pardon and salvation. Let this Holy Communion be to me an armor of faith and a shield of goodwill, a cleansing of all vices and a rooting out of all evil desires. May it increase love and patience, humility and obedience, and all virtues. May it be a firm defense against the evil designs of all my visible and invisible enemies, a perfect quieting of all the desires of soul and body. May this Holy Communion bring about a perfect union with you, the one true God, and at last enable me to reach eternal bliss when you will call me. I pray that you bring me, a sinner, to the indescribable feast where you, with your Son and the Holy Spirit, are to your saints true light, full blessedness, everlasting joy, and perfect happiness through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
A prayer for priests of St. Therese of Lisieux. O Jesus,
Eternal priest, keep your priests within the shelter of your sacred heart, where none may touch them. Keep unstained their anointed hands, which daily touch your sacred body. Keep unsullied their lips, daily purpled with your precious blood. Keep pure and unearthly their hearts, sealed with the sublime mark of the priesthood. Let your holy love surround them and shield them from the world's contagion. Bless their labors with abundant fruit, and may the souls to whom they minister be their joy and consolation, here and in heaven, their beautiful and everlasting crown. Amen.
Let us pray. Hear us, Almighty God, and as you have bestowed on your family the perfect grace of baptism, so prepare their hearts for the reward of eternal happiness through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
The Lord be with you.
And with your
May Almighty God bless you, the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit.
Amen.
Go forth, the Mass is ended. Alleluia, alleluia.
Thanks be to God. Alleluia, alleluia. Son of God, you called us to your table. Son of God, in you we are made one. Lord Jesus Christ, take us by the hand. Lord Jesus Christ, stay with us today. Son of God, you leave us not alone. Son of God, in you we trust and hope. Lord Jesus Christ, take us by the hand. Lord Jesus Christ, stay with us today. Son of God, you light the path below. Son of God, you make the brighter light. Lord Jesus Christ, take us by the hand. Lord Jesus Christ, stay with us today.
O risen Lord Jesus, you have called each one of us. Help us, Jesus, that on receiving your call, may we not hesitate to accept ourselves and as you our Lord. Being sorry for the sins we do and being grateful for all visible and invisible miracles you do for us, and receive the gift of Holy Spirit, the promise. Under the guidance of the Spirit, may we be enlightened to walk in the ways of Jesus. We make this prayer through Christ our Lord.
Amen.
Our Father,
Who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. Lead us not into temptation, but deliver us, Lord, from evil. Amen.
Hail Mary,
Full of grace, the Lord is with thee. Blessed art thou amongst women, and blessed is the fruit of thy womb, Jesus. Holy Mary, Mother of God, pray for us sinners, now and at the hour of our death. Amen.
Memorare.
Remember, O most gracious Virgin Mary, that never was it known that anyone who fled to thy protection, implored thy help, or sought thy intercession was left unaided. Inspired with this confidence, I fly to thee, O Virgin of Virgins, my Mother. To thee do I come, before thee I stand, sinful and sorrowful. O Mother of the Word incarnate, despise not my petitions, but in thy mercy hear and answer me. Amen.
Let's all say this prayer together. Queen of heaven, rejoice.
Alleluia.
For he whom you did merit to bear
Alleluia.
has risen as he said.
Alleluia.
Pray for us to God.
Alleluia. Rejoice and be glad, O Virgin Mary. Alleluia. For the Lord is risen indeed. Alleluia.
Let us pray.
O God, you deign to give joy to the world through the resurrection of your Son, our Lord Jesus Christ. Grant, we beseech you, that through his mother, the Virgin Mary, we may obtain the joys of the everlasting life. Through the same Christ our Lord. Amen.
Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
Virgin Mary,
Pray for us.
Saint Joseph,
Pray for us.
Saint Peter,
Pray for us.
Saint Paul,
Pray for us.
Saint Jose Maria Escriva.
Pray for us.
Let us make sign of the cross.
In the name of the Father, and of the Son, and of the Spirit.
ACE Choir invites you all to join us for the Divine Mercy Novena that we started on 10th of April and will be ending on 18th of April. Every day we do this Divine Mercy Novena live at 3:15